Hi, I'm Frank, and Liz and I from the Frank.lizzie.show, we're hosting our live studio here today with a guest. We are at SAWC 2023 at Gaylord Resort and Convention Center in National Harbor, Maryland. Now today our guest is an expert in the field, and he's going to talk about a modality with robust evidence behind it. Liz?
Yeah, so I'm very excited because this is talking about topical oxygen, which is something that I'm so excited to learn more about. There's obviously been robust literature that's come out in the last few years particularly. So I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Garoufalis with us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me. This is great. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this because it's like the new thing on the horizon, and the data is amazing, and so it's really picking up steam.
Yeah. And I'm excited because I just heard Liz say that she wants to learn. I thought you knew it all.
You would think, you know?
Dr. Garoufalis, let's start talking about this modality. Typically I started hearing about topical oxygen, but now I hear the term modality. Can you explain the basics of the product?
Well, the basics are this delivers oxygen under pressure, which is different. I mean, there's been topical oxygens before, and it's just like oxygen over the wound and all that. But under pressure actually drives this into the wound bed. And then you have compression as part of it. So it's a 3-modality system, which is very cool. You have the pressurized oxygen, you have the compression, which pumps the leg back and forth. We know how compression works because we've been using it in venous leg ulcers. Mm-hmm. So this allows it, pushes blood down, pushes blood back up, helps with the lymphatics because we know lymphatics play a huge role in wound care, right? Big deal.
Yeah.
So it helps with the lymphatics. So we have the compression, forcing blood up and down and helping force the oxygen in the wound. And then we have humidification. Whoever thought you needed humidification with oxygen? But think about this. Patients in the hospital that get a nasal cannula for oxygen, it's always humidified, right? Because what would happen, it should be, right?
Yeah.
What would happen up here if that oxygen was not humidified? It'd be a disaster. Dries out, starts bleeding, right? We're pumping 10 liters of oxygen into this boot. That's a lot of oxygen per minute.
Right.
Per minute, it has to be humidified, otherwise the wound will dry out. And we know that wounds that dry out don't do well as far as healing.
So it can help with like moist wound bed healing.
Yes, it doesn't soak the bandage or the dressing.
No.
It just provides moist wound healing,
Yeah.
which is what we all know works.
So I've been in wound care for the last 14 years. And when I was in an outpatient wound care clinic in a vascular surgery office, when I first started, I can remember them selling it almost like HBO in a bag.
Yeah.
And we attended the topical oxygen session earlier, and she talked about putting a bread bag and a nasal cannula in. It's not the same though. I feel like we've really evolved over time as far as what topical oxygen is and the different modalities it can provide, like you talked about.
Yes.
So can you give us a little bit of the evolution of where we've come from and where the science is today?
Well, we've always known that hypoxic wounds need oxygen to close.
Always need oxygen.
You always need oxygen,
always.
Right? You always need oxygen. That's one reason we debride is so that we can get oxygen to the wound bed and get all that junk out of there so we can get oxygen to the wound bed. So there's not a bad thing that we've tried everything under the sun to get oxygen delivered to that wound.
Right.
The bread bag idea and a plastic bag and all that.
I was mortified by
She's
that.
from my neck of the woods, by the way, I'm sure.
It sounds horrendous, but I get the theory behind it. So that's all good. We try to get oxygen to the wound bed. Now, this is like the next level. This is at a higher level because we have 3 components with the pressurized oxygen, the non-contact compression, and the humidification. It's like we're all grown up there and we're using this oxygen in a much more efficient way.
Why don't you show us some of the data?
Yeah, let me go through some of the data. Absolutely. So we have Oxygen Cares, how oxygen can help heal wounds and keep them healed. And we have solid evidence behind it now. So we'll go through that. So we know that, we for years have done a great job healing wounds that are hypoxic with our dressings and all that. And we have great success stories that we love to tell. But we also have this thing at the end of the rainbow known as reoccurrence. And these wounds that keep coming
I
back.
thought there was a pot of gold at the end of the
No,
rainbow.
this rainbow is
It's
reoccurrence.
okay.
We have a different rainbow now when we're using the oxygen. Now that we're using oxygen, we have a much better pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Okay.
So when we use oxygen, as we see on the slide, we change the whole dynamics of that wound. We increase the immune response. We get growth factors that work more efficiently. We get granulation tissue, better angiogenesis. The fibroblasts now produce better collagen because they're using oxygen to produce that collagen.
Yeah.
And then better keratinocytes, they work better at the edge and they migrate faster when they're oxygenated. So they're sprinting across the wound bed. And we get better remodeling because we get better collagen.
Cool.
Right.
So that works great. We have oxygen now. This is a little mnemonic coined by Dr. Rogalski. 2 cares. So 2 is the therapy that we're using. The C stands for collagen synthesis is enhanced. Angiogenesis is increased. The R is resistance to infection because we upregulate NAPDase oxidase. Epithelialization is supported. Those are those keratinocytes. And we get sustained healing because now we have evidence to show that wounds that use this modality stay closed longer and more sustainably.
Which I do have a question. I mean, the way I practice, you guys have changed the way I practice because now I consider oxygen as a vital role because every wound that we see is in the inflammatory phase, lack of oxygen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, but the wounds, you mentioned wounds. What kind of wounds are you using this modality?
Well, that's a great question.
That's a great question. The FDA has recognized this modality for any acute and chronic wound. So let your creativity go wild. Because I did.
You don't want that.
No, you don't do that.
No, we do want that. Because just think of all the different wounds you can use this on. That's what I did. When I first started using this, I did, buy the book. Let's do diabetic foot ulcers. Let's do venous leg ulcers. And then when I saw that it was working, I'm going, well, we have these amputations that we have to do that dehiss. Let's use it on those patients. Let's use it on patients that are compromised. How about an elective surgery? A patient who's a smoker that is not going to quit despite our efforts. Well, they heal much better afterwards in
shocking.
elective surgery too because we're oxygenating that wound. They're puffing away on a cigarette, depriving that wound of oxygen, and we're providing it for them. So even in elective cases, this is something we can use. Acute and chronic wounds. Again, let your imagination go wild. There are amazing applications here.
All right, Doc, since you went there, what Donovan didn't know is earlier at a lecture, Liz said she might have a wound on her backside. How's that boot going to fit that backside?
We have a multi-patch. It looks like a pillow. I tell you, we got it all covered.
Okay. I personally don't need it. Professionally, I may need this.
So we have a multi-patch that uses all these same theories that we can place on a wound anywhere on the body.
Okay.
And so we can deliver this type of oxygen modality anywhere we want.
So
It's
size
really good.
isn't an issue.
Any size of the wound you want.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to cover the entire wound.
Okay.
You can do the wound in stages. If it's a really big wound, okay, this morning you're going to do that part of the wound. This afternoon you're going to do this part of the wound.
Nice. Okay.
So yeah,
Great.
it works great.
All right. So
So
cares.
let's go on here because again, we're familiar with oxygen in part because of hyperbaric oxygen.
Right.
And but there's a difference. Hyperbaric is systemic. We saturate the RBCs and the plasma and deliver it through intact vasculature key to the wound, and then it diffuses from that area into the wound bed. So that is bringing oxygen from the inside out to the wound. What we're doing with this modality is providing oxygen from the outside in to the wound. So when we can do that at about 800 millimeters of mercury pressure, so a little bit above atmospheric pressure, just a bit, and we're forcing oxygen into the wound.
Pushes it into
Pushes
the
it into the
tissues.
wound.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So this is a great little graph, and this explains the 3 areas that we're interested in: oxygen under pressure, non-contact compression, humidification. This graph, when I first saw it, it horrified me because it looks really complex. But what it's looking at is 3 specific enzymes: the NAPDase oxidase, our collagen production, and of course our ATP metabolism. The teal line is normal oxygenation pressure of 100 millimeters of mercury. That's what comes through our blood system. And you see where it intersects those 3 enzyme lines. That's how it normally works. The yellow line is what happens in a hypoxic wound. And we are saying here the wound is about 10 millimeters of mercury, very hypoxic. We know that we're not going to get wound healing unless you get to 40.
Right.
Then you're going to see wound healing.
Okay.
The blue line is what happens when we put this chamber on and we turn it on and it fills up with oxygen and it starts to push oxygen in, 800 millimeters of mercury. But look where we intersect all those lines.
All the way on the right.
We're
I see that.
supercharging all these enzymes to do more work than they normally do. And that's why we see this jump start in wound closure when we use it. It's really exciting. So we've got some studies. And I always ask, any rep comes into my office, I'm going, show me the science. And if they kind of fumble around, I go, no, then I know that it's not good. We have science. We have actual studies that demonstrate that it works. We've got this diabetes care study, the RCT, that was published a couple of years ago. And Diabetes Care is kind of a big deal journal, kind of recognized worldwide as the #1 journal in diabetes care. In that study, it was an RCT, we found that wounds are 6 times more likely to heal with this modality and have a lower reoccurrence rate at 1 year of 6 times fewer reoccurrence.
Oh, wow.
So
Oxygen.
that's huge. But we know that was on stage 1 and 2 wounds. And we know that we see a lot different than 1 and 2 stage wounds, Wagner 1s, 2s.
Yeah.
And, in the real world, we see all kinds of different things.
Sure.
So then we said, okay, let's do a real world evidence study. Kind of wild, kind of risky because, you don't know what you're getting here.
Right.
But we took all comers. This was patients done in the VA.
Okay.
So in the VA, we have all kinds of weird wounds and, all sorts of strange stuff.
Use
right?
your imagination wounds.
Oh yeah. So for sure. But we took all comers here. We did stage 1, stage 2, 3, 4, PVD patients on dialysis with kidney failure.
They're always
All
excluded from
kinds.
studies.
They're always excluded from study. You never
Yeah.
see them. In this study, retrospective study, they were all included.
Great.
They were all included. We looked back for 1 year to see what happened to this group. Half of the group got oxygen in addition to whatever good wound care they were getting, whether they were skin substitutes or other types of products. The other half did not get oxygen as part of their therapy. At the end of 1 year, you're looking at the entire population, we saw the oxygen group with an 82% reduction in hospitalizations and a 73% reduction in amputations.
That's
So
significant.
that's amazing. Not only is it great for these patients, but it's great for the system.
Yeah.
Because look at the costs that you're saving here. So that was an economic study as well. We put an economic model into that study where we can go to healthcare systems and say, let's plug in your data of your diabetic patients, your diabetic ulcer patients, and we can show you in your system what you're saving if you use this modality. It's billions of dollars.
It's amazing. Now, Doc, we're getting closer to the end, but there's a lot of evidence, probably too many articles to kind of discuss today, but where can people go to look at all these research?
We have a website, the AOTI Inc.net website is perfect. It has all the articles in there. It's got all the meta-analysis in there that were used to look at all the studies. And it's got this article from Diabetes Care, the standard of care, which gave it an A rating in January. It's now recognized as an accepted standard of care.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's
Huge.
great. Yeah, that's a big deal
Yeah.
to get that blessing.
That's a
for
big
sure,
deal.
especially at a grade A.
Yeah. So a lot of great information. You have a website. You really got to check the technology. Oxygen helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, well, it's makes sense,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It's just getting the data to support it has been a forthcoming event,
Yes.
I think.
So now we have data. We're going to do a venous leg ulcer study, doing
Great.
it the same way we did our diabetic foot study.
Yeah.
That's forthcoming.
But you can also use it on pressure injuries
Oh,
or
yeah.
other, like,
Oh, yeah. We've got
backside pressure injuries.
backside pressure injuries, whatever you need, we have.
Yeah.
We can
That's
do it.
my specialty,
Absolutely.
I guess. So,
Yeah.
all
Well,
right.
before we close, I do
Yep.
want to say something. I'm going to stand up for this
Oh,
one.
no.
SAWC spring is usually Liz's birthday. Fall is my birthday. So anyway, happy birthday.
Happy
She's
birthday.
older.
All
So-
right. Happy birthday. That's awesome.
Thank you. Well, listen, if you're at SAWC, hopefully you can make it to the booth to learn more information
Please come
on
by the
AOTI.
booth, yes.
And if you are not already a Frank and Lizzie subscriber, please subscribe, watch all of our things on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Yeah. So, and we do want to thank AOTI for being here.
Absolutely.
HMP for having us,
Yes.
and also we want to thank Liz for being the great example. So,
Always.
Thank you so much for coming on
You
our
bet.
show. We
You bet.
appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
We want to thank you also for being with us.